Good evening. It's Wednesday, December 14th. Welcome to the Pipeline. I'm Corey Morgan. This is the Western Standard's weekly panel show where we cover some news items, articles, things of interest, dissect them among each other, interpret things like that. This is when I want to start out. Derek Fildebrand is usually with us. He couldn't make it today, so you're stuck with me hosting this sort of thing. And yes, we're going to be talking about some stories that are in the Western Standard. And that means if you have a subscription, you've probably already read them. If you don't have a subscription yet, guys, what are you waiting for? $9.99 a month, $99 a year. It's well worth it. Come on, you used to pay that much for a newspaper subscription. And this way you don't even have to get rid of all those newspapers afterwards. And it helps us stay independent. We refuse to take any government tax dollars. That's just not the way we operate. And that way we can critically talk about the issues that are important to you rather than what's important to, say, Prime Minister Trudeau. So I'm joined today on the panel. Since we had that extra opening, I'll kind of move from the outside to in. Everybody already knows Nigel, but we got Jonathan Bradley, our intrepid Alberta reporter, here at the table today. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Thank you, Corey, for having me. I'm really looking forward to it.
Great. And of course, Nigel Hannaford, our opinion editor, in his usual spot in the middle. You haven't moved an inch.
Always good to be here.
Yes.
That's me. I'm just known to be a centrist.
Okay, well, centrist. There, you're the one. All right, so we're going to get into some stuff and dive right in right away. I should remind you that we pay our bills is through sponsorships, and we have a great sponsor with the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Have a quick look at this video, check it out, and make sure to take out a membership with these guys.
Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Without the CSSA, our gun rights would have been taken long ago. These guys are on the front lines helping to draft smart and intelligent firearms regulations and legislation in Canada, and more importantly, educating the public about how we keep guns out of the hands of the wrong people. To become a member, it's absolutely worth every penny. Canadian Shooting Sports.
Okay, so if you didn't catch that before, it's the Canadian Shooting Association, CSSA-CILA.org. We got a government that's coming for your property. They want to take it away. These guys are standing up for you. If you own firearms, or even if you want to stand up for the others who own firearms, stand up for your neighbor, check them out, take out a membership. It's well worth it, and invest in your own rights, guys. Okay, let's get into it. Something, this is nothing new. We've got that's Central Canadian vanity, I guess. We get people come out, they move out here, they don't necessarily like it, they move back, whatever it happens. But in Canada, it makes a story. They've written a long piece. A person who came out to Alberta, she didn't enjoy it. She spent 3 months, the horrors, the travesties she had to put up. She was too far from local nightclubs and things such as that. And now I guess it's made news in the Toronto Life. Did you read that piece, Nigel?
I did not read it. I do not normally read Toronto Life.
I understand.
But I'll tell you something about this lady. She'll be back. So this is what's going on here. You come from another place. You come to Canada, or you come to Alberta, come to Edmonton, and you find it's different. You expected it to be different, but it's not different the way you wanted it to be. Brits used to do this all the time. It was called the $1,000 cure. You would emigrate from Britain to Canada. Winters are too cold. It's a long way from home. Mum writes complaining letters. So you take the boat back and you go back where you started. And you say, no, it was the right thing to leave when I left the first time. And so you ship back again. All you've done is spend a bunch of money, the $1,000 cure. So I don't know what this lady's airfare is going to be, but my guess is that once she's been back in Toronto for a while, she's going to say, yep, the reasons that I maybe want to go to Alberta in the first place were entirely valid. I'm going to get my plane ticket and I'm on my way back here, but I'm going to live a little closer to town.
Well, she may have learned that lesson with part of it. I mean, I just noticed a story that came up that the average commute in Toronto right now is 56 minutes. Part of what this lady's choice, she didn't just move to Edmonton, she moved actually to a bedroom community outside of Edmonton. Maybe she didn't research her homes well enough, because I guess one of her complaints was it was a really long drive to get to the Cactus Club. I can't imagine being that far.
Well, according to the article, it was 30 minutes. That beats 56 by 26 minutes.
I would think. And I mean, presumably the Uber driver is going to do it. But we go to you, Jonathan. I mean, you've chosen to move out to Alberta. You're still on your first crack at it, I believe. You're still here.
Yes, I am.
So you came from out in that Toronto sort of area. Have the trials and tribulations really been wearing you down?
Well, Alberta's been amazing to me. I'm really happy I moved out here. It's more affordable. It's cleaner. People are friendlier. One thing I will note, though, with my experience is I actually have a few friends who are thinking about moving out here from Toronto just because they don't see a future for themselves in Toronto. I mean, with this lady, she was making six figures. She even admitted that in the article. So, she kind of she could probably survive in Toronto and, do well. Whereas a young person like myself or someone else who, just graduated from school and isn't making six figures or making a whole bunch of money comes out to Alberta and, it's more affordable here. Rent prices are lower. One thing that I was kind of confused about with her is why was she living in Beaumont if she's like a party girl? Like, I haven't been to Beaumont, but I've heard that it's like a bedroom community and there's not really much to do. So like, why wouldn't she want to buy a place, rent or buy a place in downtown Edmonton, given that average rents in Edmonton, according to rentals.ca, are about $1,100 a month?
Mm-hmm. So you don't miss Yorkville?
No, not at all.
Well, I mean, a part of it's just researching your destination. I mean, if parties are the important part to you, then by all means move where they are. And, we like the inter-regional play, though. I mean, I would dare to say Toronto's got a livelier downtown than any Alberta cities. Montreal actually could claim that as well. We're not the most big party towns, but we have plenty of nightclubs and bars. If you're coming to Calgary, we do have a Cactus Club on 3rd and 8th. So if she decides on her second move to come here, perhaps get near that.
And what's weird about this lady was she was complaining about how, she's like, couldn't find a shisha lounge to go to. Like, when I asked people, they were like, what's a lounge? But, all she had to do was just go on Google Maps. Like, I went on Google Maps prior to going on my show to search for shisha lounges in Edmonton, and there was 4. So I don't know why she was complaining about how there's no shisha lounges there.
Okay, for people like me who watch our program, what is a shisha?
Shisha is hookah. It's a Persian pipe smoking lounge where you go and you smoke.
Water pipes.
Yeah, water pipes.
So like the one that Corey goes to on Friday afternoons.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, but that's pot. That's
Well,
different.
that's Bob. Once you've done the show.
Yes. This is my post-show. The water pipe smooths it out. But yeah, little things like that. If these are important, it's kind of a funny piece. And I mean, still what's striking. Okay, somebody moved, they didn't like it, but was this worthy of writing up in a large Toronto piece? I guess if you're looking for clicks, because it's going to. Well, we're talking about it. It's going to inflame us a little, and it's going to get Toronto going, and we get at each other's backs.
So what we need to do is we actually take it upon ourselves to send this lady a copy of his article, 5 reasons why. Was it 5 reasons why Edmonton didn't suck?
Yeah, 5 reasons why
Okay.
Edmonton doesn't suck.
Obviously, she didn't. She hasn't got it. There are some good things. She needs to get that article.
Well, yeah, and if she wants to play that, come to Calgary,
No.
move here. And Calgary always talks about why Edmonton sucks anyway. So you could do that locally and still be in Alberta. But what about those 5 reasons? Since we got you going.
So the 5 reasons why Edmonton doesn't suck were the Edmonton Valley Zoo is cheaper than the Calgary Zoo, funny drug addicts, calmer vibes, green onion cakes, and West Edmonton Mall.
Funny drug addicts.
Yes, when I went.
Man,
to
that's some
Edmonton-
dark humor you're getting into
Yeah.
here.
When I went to Edmonton back in August, Western Standard publisher Derek Fildebrandt sent me on a workation to go cover the Alberta United Conservative Party leadership race debate in Edmonton. I was walking in downtown core, and there's one drug addict I saw, and she was walking down the street, and she was cackling like like that. And then I just looked at her. I was like, "What the heck?" And she's like, "Sorry, sir, I smoked too much weed." And I was like, "Maybe you smoke some other stuff other than weed."
As long as she was laughing, I guess.
It's
Do what you
the
will.
other kind, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, and it's cheaper in a movie, that's for sure.
And Arthur Green's, no doubt.
Yes, and Arthur's been covering that. We'll talk a little bit about the Edmonton streets actually in our 3rd segment. So maybe we'll move along from our regional battles and run a quick spot and an ad to help cover some of our bills before we get on to the next subject here as well.
Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Without the CSSA, our gun rights would have been taken long ago. These guys are on the front lines helping to draft smart and intelligent firearms regulations and legislation in Canada, and more importantly, educating the public about how we keep guns out of the hands of the wrong people. To become a member, it's absolutely worth every penny.
Okay, so let's move on to some politics. That's more of our meat and potatoes around here, anyways. And federally, we have, it took quite a while to go through it, but it usually does. The ethics commissioner has ruled on Liberal Cabinet Minister Mary Ng, who was found in a breach of the Conflict of Interest Act when she sole sourced a contract. Actually, I should have written it down. I believe it was for $29,000 to a close personal friend of hers from her office, which, I mean, again, anybody, you don't need to be told when you hold a senior position in government, you can't give direct jobs and contracts to your friends, or you shouldn't. But what's striking about this is, aside from being told that, yes, you were in breach, there doesn't appear to be any consequences. What do you make of that, Nigel?
Well, first of all, I think it is a great departure from tradition. And secondly, they take their cue from the top. I mean, unfortunately, the Prime Minister himself has been found guilty of ethics breaches on more than one occasion, but he's still the Prime Minister. And that sets the standard of accountability for everybody who works in government. And she is, when it's clear that it's enough to just say you're sorry and move on, you don't resign. But it never used to be that way. Man, 50, 60 years ago, you'd have to resign if you got divorced. I mean, maybe we don't want to go back to that, but there is a certain standard of ethical behavior that we expect from our leaders, from our politicians. And one of the things that I've noticed over the past few years is how much that has become stretched. Take, for example, the Supreme Court Chief Justice, Richard Wagner. Basically, you hope that your justices are going to be neutral on any case that comes before them. Well, Chief Justice Wagner, we now know, will not be neutral if anything to do with the trucking convoy comes his way. In fact, the ethical thing for him to do would be not to sit on that panel, because he has already declared his point of view that they're a lawless group. Regardless of whether you agree with him or not, some people may think that he's right on, even though we don't. I don't. The fact is, he's already declared his predisposition, so he can't really hear these people honestly. Here in Alberta, we have got a lieutenant governor who has passed judgment on legislation that has not even been written. Speaking of the Alberta Sovereignty Act, obviously. We started talking about what she wouldn't do and what her role was if there was a constitutional crisis. She would have been so much better to leave that to a constitutional expert that the news media could have found easily enough. But again, that's the kind of thing that just never used to be done. We had a Liberal cabinet minister here. Who was it? Dominic LeBlanc. I guess this was a few years ago. Got himself into trouble over something. He's still a minister. So where's the accountability? And that's something that we need to start. We need to start teaching the principles of honor and doing the right thing, and knowing when you're called out and it's time for you to take time in the penalty box. You need to start teaching that much earlier in life, schools even.
Well, yeah, well, folks like ourselves have been around a little longer. Remember sometimes when, at the very least, a minister would have sort of shuffled off to the back bench, or the justice would have at least said, you know what, okay, I stepped in it. I have to recuse myself from anything having to do with this particular item. But they're unapologetic now. I mean, they offer, Ng offered a forced apology, as you have to when the commissioner comes down at you, but there's no contrition. Like Jonathan, you're of the younger generation. You haven't really seen times when there was much accountability. I mean, it's entrenching a sense that that's how it's always going to be. I think that's a dangerous trend.
I guess so. I mean, I remember I was in a first-year university when Trudeau was convicted of breaking of his first ethics violation for the Aga Khan vacation. And I remember hearing at that time that Trudeau was the first prime minister to break federal ethics law, because I remember he was doing the prime minister's town halls at the time. One lady asked him, "How do you feel knowing that you're doing the first prime minister to be convicted of breaking ethics law?" And it is kind of disturbing, because not only did he break it once, he broke it a second time with the SNC-Lavalin scandal. And then he's had some close calls like with the Bowie charity scandal. But the thing with the Bowie charity scandal was, at least with Bill Morneau, he resigned with being implicated in that scandal. And also with some of Trudeau's advisors during the SNC-Lavalin scandal, they resigned. So there is some integrity, but Trudeau just seems to have complete disregard for integrity.
With all due respect, Jonathan, there's a difference between integrity and taking one for the team. Gerald Butts, one of the advisors, I think if somebody had to be accountable, let it not be the Prime Minister, was the thinking. So he was the one who went.
Yeah.
I would like to think that it was integrity. But I remain unconvinced.
Okay.
Well, political staffers, they fall on the sword for who they work for all the time. That's why they always sign up for those huge severance packages, because they know in that line of work, your chances of making it the full term for whatever minister or whatnot you're working for can often, well, unfortunately, because they always seem to get immersed in a scandal, there's going to be a problem down the road. It's frustrating and watching. But I mean, part of the accountability too should come from the electorate. As Jonathan pointed out, Trudeau has been mired in a number of these. But guess what? He's getting reelected and reelected and reelected. I mean, if the voters won't fire him and punish him for it, well, who will?
Oh, that's certainly true, Corey. I mean, admittedly, I notice his vote count has been coming down with each election. He won well in 2015, but it seems to me that in 2019 there were about 500,000 people less who voted Liberal. And he lost another 1 million in 2021. So some people are starting to catch on. I just wish more would catch on quicker.
Well, we'll see. I'm throwing that all on your lap, Jonathan. You're of that younger generation. You do some outreach and get them out there and start firing the guy with the pretty hair.
Well, I think that with Poilievre, we're starting to see that. Like, I mean, in my friend group at least, Poilievre's really talking about the issues carrying for my generation, as particularly with, one of them in particular is housing. Like, I'm from Toronto, and average rent in Toronto for a one-bedroom apartment is about $2,400 a month, which is like if you're a new graduate or even someone who had like graduated a few years ago, like that's unaffordable. Like I know people who are living in Toronto who have like strange living arrangements where they're like living with a distant family member, or they have a whole bunch of roommates who are living with just so they can afford a place. Whereas like in some areas of Canada, it's affordable to like live on your own, like say Calgary, Edmonton, or Montreal, places like that. But Toronto, Vancouver, like I really feel about Poilievre, if he appeals to like the housing issue, he'll be able to win over some young people and possibly beat out Trudeau.
We'll see. There's certainly cracks in the Trudeau armor if somebody can just figure them out, and maybe Poilievre will be the one.
Maybe.
So let's spin things a little bit closer back to home again and get it to Edmonton. Again, that dire city of Edmonton that Jackie Thomas was so terribly done by. All the same, there are some problems in Edmonton. Social disorder. Every city's dealing with that, actually. And the UCP has just recently, I guess, done their announcement of forming a social disorder task force within Edmonton. It's quite a remarkable number of people within it, actually, though that doesn't necessarily mean you'll get anything done. But Mayor Sohi is pretty upset with that. He didn't like this task force at all. What did you make of this mess, Nigel?
Well, okay, so again, with all due respect to Mr. Sohi, he is a former Liberal cabinet minister who lost his seat. And so I would expect him to be reflexively against anything that came out of the provincial government led by Danielle Smith. It would be off message if he wasn't. But I think the idea of actually getting a bunch of people who care together to look at the problem and see if there is something that can be done, and I say if because it's very difficult when, let's be honest about it, let's not mince words, the common problem among this group of people that they're trying to help is addiction. It's one of the most difficult things to do. I'm not smart enough to have a quick fix for that problem, but at least the government of Alberta has recognized that it is a problem and is getting people together to talk about what can be done. I don't know. To me, the thing when this went off the rails was probably about 30 years ago, when they began to deinstitutionalize people who, frankly, had a job making it on their own. And I know the arguments, you know, it was, oh, well, they're free people, they should have agency. Yes. Unfortunately, when you become bonded with a drug, you're not really a free agent anymore. So maybe there's a case to be made for intervention. But now I'm starting to sound like somebody who actually does have a solution. I don't.
No, that could be a facet anyways. And that disorder and that addiction. And Jonathan, you sort of referenced it. I mean, in kind of your first real trip to Edmonton,
Yeah.
though, I mean, it says a lot that, you know, thing that struck you was an experience with a person on the streets who was impaired. And, you know, it's becoming, you know, ubiquitous. I mean, you go to a downtown and I mean, you can't help
Yeah.
but see the disorder going on.
I mean, I've seen it all across Canada. Like I was in Ottawa earlier this year for the Canada Stronger Free Network National Conference. And I remember I was walking through Byward Market, which is very kind of like that where all the shops are in Ottawa. It's like this nice neighborhood. And there were all these homeless people just walking around. I think I maybe counted like 10 within 20 minutes, something like that. And I was deeply disturbed by that. One point to note about the Alberta government implementing this is I think that Danielle Smith's chief of staff is Marshall Smith, who used to work in Alberta Mental Health and Addictions and is a recovered drug addict himself. So I think it'll be good to hear his insights on the issue because he'll probably have some, he'll probably be behind steering the committee a little.
Yeah, well, and getting to that, I mean, if you look it up, and it's in the story on the Western Standard online too, it's quite a panel that's put together. I mean, there's a couple of First Nations chiefs involved because, again, another sensitive aspect of it, but is the Indigenous communities are quite overrepresented when it comes to the people troubled on the streets and with addiction. So having some insight from people from those communities helps, without doubt. You know, they're taking it seriously. A couple of Edmonton city councillors, not Mayor Sohi himself apparently, but addiction specialists, like it does have the appearance of a panel of somebody who really wants to get something accomplished. I would hope anyways. I'm trying to maintain optimism. As Nigel said, it's a complicated issue and it's going to cost money. And there's part of the issue too. I mentioned, you know, Mayor Sohi certainly loves spending money when it's other issues, bike lanes, for example. I mean, the homeless can put their shopping carts up and down those nice clear bike lanes, but he doesn't seem to have the funds to help them with the addiction.
Yeah. Well, you know, we should certainly be concerned about the needs of people who are homeless and who are in the grip of drugs. How do we help them? That is a legitimate thing. It's a priority. But there is another population which isn't addicted, which pays the bills. They get up, they go to work, they pay taxes, and they expect their common areas to be available to them. They don't expect to find, let's just say there's plenty of evidence when homeless people have occupied a telephone booth or a small area or whatever. And, you know, it's pretty tough if you can't take your sandwich to the park at lunchtime for fear of just don't make eye contact. You know, that's not a comfortable way. So at some point, that interest has to be met as well. It's very legitimate. You build something nice and then you find you can't use it. So the matter of the allocation of funds in the city of Edmonton, to me, as a driver who drives to work, the expenditure of money on bike lanes is suspect to begin with and seems like an anti-car measure more than a pro-bike measure. But if we have this much problem with homeless people, how far up on the priority list ought it to be? Maybe not far, and in any case, below trying to find a solution for homeless addicted people.
Absolutely. And I would guess and imagine maybe, I mean, Calgary might have a similar task force coming pretty soon. I don't know the UCP plans, but we have the same problem here. Like Jonathan, you've been living downtown towards the core, and it's pretty evident and visible here as well.
Oh, on the weekends especially. Like I remember one weekend, one of my first weekends here, I was like, oh, you know, I'm like, I just want to see like what's open. And I remember I searched Tim Hortons to see how many there were in the downtown core. And I remember just clicking around and like every single one of them was closed. And I was like, okay, what about Starbucks? So I kept in every single one of them was closed. And there's times when you walk in the downtown core and it's just like, it's dead. You feel like you're walking in like some zombie apocalypse movie where like all the humans have died except for like a handful. and you're like, what is going on here? Like, and there's like the homeless people walking around, obviously, screaming or like just like comatose, lying on the ground. I think about 2 months ago, there was a homeless guy who almost had to call the ambulance on because he was passed out after he took some drugs, and I ran up to him, just wanted to make sure he was fine. And I was about to like call, and then he woke up and was like, "Oh, I took some fentanyl."
Yeah, no, it's all over the place. And our own reporter, Arthur Green, he's moved from Bonnyville down to Edmonton. He's been there, and he's been taking some very graphic pictures, I guess you say, on the transit system of people, consuming drugs, people inebriated in bad ways, or even the human waste, literally, that they leave behind in some transit stations. And people got very upset with him for doing that. I mean, there's a large element of people who just don't want to talk about it, or and they try to shout it down. And unfortunately, it's become politicized a lot. I mean, it seems there's almost been two lines drawn on this. There's this obsession with safe consumption and safe supply, and another on the other end saying, no, it all has to be on treatment. And it seems, why can't we agree that we kind of need both? You can't treat them if they're dead. So if we can keep them going, I understand giving clean needles and such, but it should be coupled with a path towards treatment so that you're just kicking this can down the road forever. But again, it's hopelessly, we let our partisan stripes ruin finding solutions sometimes.
Well, as you say, it gets politicized. Well, when you're spending big money, $160 million is still big money for a municipality. Yeah, that should be political. That's worth the discussion, and that's now politics. To me, it seems that if there's that much money laying around for some purpose, this would be the place to put it, not bike lanes, not this year.
Yeah, and I think it is a good place, assuming they're going to put it into places where it'll fix. And so there is no simple path. So, well, I guess we can hope for the best, and they'll stop sniping long enough.
On a positive note, we entertained a visitor from Toronto last year, Judy and I, and we were driving downtown, and there were people going this way and that way with their shopping carts full of bags of bottles. And the fellow says, they're not like that where I come from. Even in Calgary, even your homeless people are entrepreneurial. And I just thought, well, there's got to be some good thing somewhere.
I mean, with moving from Toronto, one thing I've noticed is that in Toronto, many of the homeless people panhandle to get their money, whereas in Calgary, many of them collect bottles.
Yeah.
I maybe only seen a handful of people who panhandle or like beg for money, whereas most of them are just, walking around picking up beer cans or water bottles, things like that.
Yeah, well, and times are changing and things change. I mean, we don't have that street crowd in Calgary, actually, people walking out there as much as Toronto, so it's probably not as lucrative to outright panhandle. And,
yes.
And people don't carry cash anymore. So, I in the panhandling world, that has to be quite a detriment. I mean, it's not like they've got a square that they can take a donation at when you go by, and I don't carry cash anymore. So, yeah. Well, we can hope for the best, I guess, as I said. I think it's hopefully a positive initiative. I mean, I think most people, the term compassionate conservatism, we want to take care of those who can't take care of themselves. And these people who are addicted need some help. So hopefully they can set the politics aside and get some stuff
Somebody's
done.
making an effort. Yes. That is a good thing.
It is. Well, we'll applaud them even if it seems to be a chronic oppositional disorder with some of our elements in the media when it comes to Premier Smith's initiatives in general right now.
How true.
Okay, I think we've covered what we wanted to cover today, though, guys. Always good to get on the pipeline. See, it's a lot shorter when we don't have Derek here going on. So we can get straight to the issues. But
it gives our viewers more time to switch to our video content and check out what was your rant on this morning.
Did I rant about this morning?
The treaties.
The treaties,
yes,
that's
the
right.
Treaties, reading those treaties.
Go watch Corey Morgan's thoughts on
day, So yes,
treaties.
By all means. So thank you, Nigel and Jonathan, and thank you guys for tuning in. Be sure to tune in again next week at this time again.